clicking on this video. My name is Carolyn and this channel is all about true crime, mystery, and anything abnormal. I highly recommend subscribing because this channel is definitely a vibe. Today's story is about a woman who is often referred to as the Devil Woman. And I have to say, it's fitting. So let's get into the story. And who is this Devil Woman? Well, her name is Kelly Cochran. Kelly Cochran was born in Marysville, Indiana on June 5th, 1982. Kelly's mother described Kelly as a child as a very difficult child, and this only seemed to get worse when she entered her teenage years. She was hanging around a bad crowd, and she was doing substances, and she was running away from home a lot, and her mother decided that she wanted to intervene and do something to try to get Kelly back under control, where she was being more responsible, following rules and those types of things. So she ended up sending Kelly to a girls' home, and her mother thought this maybe would provide her some structure, and maybe if it was someone other than her mother telling her what to do, maybe she would listen better. But Kelly, the one thing about her is she's not interested in listening to anyone. Kelly, the only person she cares about and the only person she's going to listen to is herself. While Kelly was away at this girl's home, she was there for a year, and she kept in contact with a lot of her friends, and she also kept in contact with a neighbor of hers named Jason. After a year away at this girl's home, she returned home, went back to high school, and her neighbor Jason began getting a lot closer, and the two of them began dating. And it wasn't long after they graduated high school that Kelly and Jason decided to get married. A lot of people who knew the couple found them to be a bit of an odd pair because Kelly was very outgoing, very social. She loved going out, spending a lot of times with friends, where Jason was more of a homebody. He liked a quiet evening at home, and although the two were opposites, it did work quite well because the two were married for over 10 years and they seemed to be quite happy together. Jason ran a pool maintenance company, and Kelly would assist him working at this maintenance company. Unfortunately, Jason ended up suffering a quite severe back injury, and he was no longer able to do physical manual labor as a job. Jason and Kelly felt after his injury and inability to work that they decided they wanted to get a bit of a fresh start. So they ended up moving to Caspian, Michigan, which was a very small town close to the Canadian border. Kelly ended up finding a job at the Oldenburg Group factory. She got along really well with everyone at work. Some would say maybe she got along a little too well with some of the men, because not long after she started working there, she started having multiple affairs. Kelly soon met a man by the name of Christopher Regan. He was 53 years old. He was originally from Detroit, and he was an Air Force veteran. He had moved to kind of this more remote area of Michigan because he loved spending time in the outdoors. He loved being in nature. He loved being able to go on hikes and go fishing, and he was really kind of an outdoorsy guy. So he decided that living in rural Michigan was the place for him. And as much as he enjoyed the outdoors, he really was having a hard time because his ex-wife and their sons were living in Asheville, North Carolina. He decided that he really wanted to try to rebuild the relationship he had with his sons. So November 2014, he got a job in Asheville, and he was planning to relocate there to North Carolina to be closer to his sons. After Christopher was divorced from his wife, he started dating here and there, and then he ended up connecting with Terry O'Donnell, who was a high school friend of his. And the pair dated for a short while, and even though their romantic relationship didn't work out, they kept in contact and were still very good friends. And one thing about Christopher was he was always there for Terry. If Terry called him, he always picked up the phone. If he didn't answer the phone, he would call her back. So when October 14th, 2014 rolled around and she started trying to get in contact with Christopher, she could not get in contact with him. And after several days, she began to become very concerned because this was very not typical behavior for him. But since Terry knew that he was planning to move to a different state, she thought possibly, he's busy packing, getting everything ready, and planning his move. So she just thought he's probably got a lot on his plate and doesn't have time right now to, give me a call back. But a few weeks went by and Terry became very, very concerned. This was not typical of Christopher at all. So what she decided to do was she contacted some of his co-workers to see if maybe they had spoken with him, and she just really wanted to make sure that he was okay. But when she spoke to his co-workers, they all confirmed that no one had seen or spoken to him since October 27th, 2014. And when Terry heard this, she immediately contacted the police and reported him missing. He was reported missing to the Iron River Police Department, and it was a very small department. I believe when I was researching, they only had about 4 police officers that worked. It was a very, very small police, I don't know, do you call it a police force if it's only 4? It was a really small police department. Yeah, I guess that's a better word. A woman by the name of Laura Frizzo, she was the chief of police for the Iron River Police Department, and she was the one who handled Christopher's case. The first thing Officer Frizzo did was she went by Christopher's apartment, and when she looked in the windows, she could see that all of his belongings were still there, because there was a little bit of thought of, did he possibly move and not tell anyone? But once they saw all of his belongings were still in his apartment, they became a little bit more suspicious that something didn't quite seem right. The next thing they did was try to locate his car, and his car was located in Bates Park and Go. And when they came across his car, inside of his car was a knee brace. Once they saw that his knee brace was in the car, that's when alarm bells really went off, because Christopher had recently had surgery and he couldn't go anywhere without this knee brace. He would take it off periodically to drive, but if he was going to walk, he needed to be wearing this knee brace. So it became very concerning as to where did he go if his knee brace and his car are sitting in this parking lot. Chief Frizzo talked to Terry O'Donnell, who was the one who had reported him missing, and she started asking her a lot of questions about his private life and what was going on. In this conversation, Terry mentioned that Christopher had recently had an affair with a woman by the name of Kelly Cochran. So then, obviously, the police chief goes to Kelly Cochran's house, and she knocks on the door, and Kelly's husband, Jason, is the one who opens the door. And as soon as Chief Frizzo asks to speak with Kelly, that it's in regards to Christopher's disappearance, Jason becomes very hostile with her and tells her that Kelly is not home. But a couple seconds go by and Kelly appears behind him in the doorway. When Kelly was questioned about Christopher, she said she was very surprised to hear that he was missing, and she assumed that he had moved away and just not mentioned it to her. She also said that her affair with Christopher, her husband was well aware of. And Chief Frizzo, the whole interaction with the couple was very suspicious to her. So she asked the two of them to come down to the police department so that they could properly be interviewed. The first thing they did, which they always do, is they separated the two of them. So Kelly's in one room being interviewed, and she claims that she is madly in love with Christopher and that her marriage to Jason is over. She told the police that because of the injury Jason had suffered, he wasn't able to, I think she didn't come right out and say this, but it almost seems as though he wasn't able to have sex. And I'm just assuming that based on what I'm reading, because a lot of what she would say is that his back injury was causing problems in the marriage. So he was okay with her having affairs with whoever she wanted. So I don't know if that meant somehow his injury made it difficult or unable to be able to have sex with Kelly. So he allowed her to be with other men. But either way, that's not what... Like, that's not, no. Like, if you're in a marriage and someone is injured and they're not able to be intimate, yeah, you don't just go out and start sleeping with other people. And the spouse that's injured, I'm pretty sure they're not going to be okay with that. But when her husband Jason was interviewed, his opinion on the affairs was very different than Kelly's. He was very sad about her having affairs, which normal. And he was also very nervous, and his story kept changing. Initially, he said he had only ever heard about Christopher. He'd never met him. He didn't know where he lived. He didn't know anything about him. He just knew his first name, and it had only been mentioned to him. Then later, he claimed that he used to go on evening walks, and one time happened to walk past Christopher's house, and Kelly's vehicle was parked in his driveway. So things are starting to get a little shady, because Jason, every time he's asked questions, nothing he's saying matches what he just said. Like, he can't keep a story straight for like minutes at a time. He's back and forth, and I didn't know anything, and then I knew this, and no, I didn't know that, and da-da-da-da, and he's just all over the place. So suspicion was getting higher and higher the longer anyone talked to these two individuals. Based on everything that the police had heard and Kelly's connection with Christopher, they decided to do a search warrant on the home. And when they did a search warrant, they did find some weapons. They did find some hunting equipment and guns that you would use for hunting. But the thing that stood out the most was in the living room, they could see on the ceiling that there were all these tiny little red dots. And it looked as though someone had painted over them, like with white paint, but you could still see these little dots. So police are in this home looking up at the ceiling, and they kind of look at each other like, I think the crime may have happened in this room. So they take a sample from the ceiling of the little, well, it was blood splatter. Spoiler alert. So they take samples of it and they send it away to be tested. Now, they can't get the DNA of the blood, but they can confirm that it's human blood. So yeah, normal people, they don't have human blood splatter all over their living room. You know, that's not normal. No. So while the police are in their home and doing the search, taking the samples, they tell Jason and Kelly that they can't stay at the house for the next 12 hours. Police want to conclude all the work that they're doing in the home. So they say they're going to go stay with their next door neighbors. But by the next morning, Jason and Kelly disappear. At this point, they start interviewing the neighbors, and the neighbors had some very, very interesting things to say. A lot of the neighbors mentioned in mid-October hearing very strange sounds coming from their home. An elderly woman who lived across the street from the couple claims that she heard a gunshot in the home in mid-October. And a lot of other neighbors claimed that they had heard power tools being used, but they were being used in the middle of the night. So during the day, they weren't hearing, you know, because people renovate their homes, they do work to their homes, power tools are used. But nobody was ever doing that during the day. The only time these power tools were used was in the middle of the night. So obviously the neighbors find it a little bit suspicious. And then when they tell the police, they become even more suspicious. When the couple had fled, obviously Chief Rizzo, she wants to find Kelly and Jason, and she wants to bring them back. So they're located in Hobart, Indiana. Another thing one of the neighbors had said was that the couple seemed to be burning a lot of things in the fire pit outside of their home, like in their backyard. When the police go to investigate the fire pit, they don't find any human remains, but they do find burnt jeans and other partially burnt clothing items. One of the first things the FBI does is they trace the GPS on Christopher's phone for the day that they think that he went missing. And guess where his GPS shows that he was? At Kelly and Jason's home. And after that, his phone is turned off and never turned back on. So the police, the FBI, they're investigating this. They don't have really enough to make an arrest. They don't have enough for a full case, but they're still investigating and trying to gather as much evidence and information as they can. While they're doing this, Jason and Kelly are living in Hobart, Indiana. Then February 2016, Kelly makes a 911 call. She claims that Jason is unconscious, she can't get him to breathe, and, she needs paramedics. So the paramedics come to the home, but unfortunately, Jason had already passed away. But one thing that was very interesting was that the paramedics who are trying to save Jason's life said that Kelly was trying to prevent them from offering aid to him. So if they were obviously, if someone's unconscious, they're not breathing, they're trying to do CPR. Kelly would come in and she would get in their way and she would move them, or like she was just really trying not to let them perform CPR, which obviously, if you're calling to have someone perform CPR, you want them to live. But if you don't want them to live, then you don't want the CPR to work. You don't want them to start breathing again. And Kelly definitely falls into that category. Initially, it seemed as though Jason had died from a heroin overdose. But when they were doing his autopsy, they actually found the cause of death was asphyxia. After learning of Jason's death, several of Jason's friends contacted the FBI, and they said that they very firmly believed that Kelly had killed Jason and that they wanted to make sure that the police and the FBI were investigating his death and not to take this at face value, that they really needed to look into Kelly. And trust me, the FBI and the police, that's the track they were on. They were suspicious of Kelly from the very beginning. The FBI, they bring Kelly in for more questioning. So when Kelly is being questioned, she admits to the FBI that Jason, her husband, was the one who killed Christopher because he was her lover. And as Kelly is telling the police and the FBI this story, there are a lot of inconsistencies, and a lot of what she's saying is not making sense. Kelly knew she was in trouble, and she knew she was going to be arrested quickly. So she took off, but the U.S. Marshal was able to find her in Kentucky and bring her back. Kelly Cochran was arrested on April 28, 2016, 9 weeks after the death of her husband, Jason. She was then extradited to Iron River, Michigan in May 2016. And this time she had a whole new story. She told investigators that on her wedding night, her and Jason had made a blood pact. What this involved was that if either one of them ever cheated on the other one, they would have to kill their lover. So if you're going to make a pact on your wedding night, why don't you make the pact, we're not going to cheat on each other? Because that would probably be, I don't know, common. I don't know why. Like, who on their wedding night is saying, if you cheat on me, you're going to have to murder someone? Like, annul the wedding, get out. But both of them were, I guess, really into this idea. And that was the agreement that they had come up with. So the couple decided that on October 13th, 2014, Kelly would invite Christopher Regan over to her house, claiming, my husband's away, come on over, we'll have a little sexy time. That was not the case at all. As soon as Christopher arrived at the home, Jason took out a .22 caliber gun and shot and killed him in the living room, exactly where the police found the splatter on the ceiling. And those police officers were right on, because as soon as they entered that living room and saw that on the ceiling, they believed 100% a murder had been committed in that room, and they were 100% correct. Kelly then told them that they had then cut up his body, put it in different garbage bags, and disposed of these garbage bags in the woods. When she had told the police this, the police obviously are like, take us to the garbage bags. Now, they were never able to find any garbage bags with any body parts in it, but nearby they did find a human skull. But the police, they now know that Kelly and Jason killed Christopher, but they still want to figure out, well, what happened to Jason? Because that kind of was suspicious too. Kelly, can you share with us what exactly happened to your husband, Jason? Kelly finally, I guess, figured there was no way out of this. So she said she was very angry at Jason for killing Christopher. So she gave him a fatal dose of heroin. But he began throwing up, I guess, while he was overdosing. So she took her hand and covered his mouth and his nose. So that's why his cause of death was asphyxiation, not an overdose. So yeah, Kelly, that's murder. In February 2017, Kelly Cochran was charged with first-degree murder for killing Christopher Regan, conspiracy to mutilate a dead body, concealment of death, and larceny. And now, I gotta tell you, I always gotta tell you gross shit in these stories. One time I'm gonna find one of these stories without such gross stuff, but okay. So 11 of the neighbors came forward. Right after Christopher was killed, Kelly and Jason had a barbecue in their backyard, and they invited all their neighbors. Now, the one thing that was very strange was the burgers they were serving. Everyone found them very concerning. They said it was white meat and almost translucent. Now, I have no idea what meat from a human happens when you cook it, but I'm guessing this being translucent is, I guess, what happens with human flesh. So all of these neighbors, even though obviously it can't be proven at this point, they believe that the burgers that they served was Christopher. On March 10th, Kelly was convicted of first-degree murder, and she was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. She was then charged with killing her husband, Jason. For that, she pled no contest, and she was sentenced to an additional 65 years. So we know for sure that Kelly took two people's lives. The interesting thing is, people who knew Kelly think that there were a lot more victims. One person specifically, her brother, he believes that Kelly was a serial killer, and he believes that she could have as many as 9 victims. Now, this came up, and there were a lot of people that knew Kelly that thought there's definitely more people whose lives she has taken. But I couldn't find any information of them saying a specific person or a specific situation. Like, it was just kind of presented as though we believe she's a serial killer, but they're not kind of naming the people they think she killed. I think they just thought she was psychotic and possibly could have been a serial killer. Now, I don't know. Maybe the family and friends who believed this, maybe they have told the police or the FBI details of who these people they think that she killed are, and maybe they've looked into it and it's not something they were able to like confirm. But yeah, I guess if you can, you're convicted of murdering 2 people and the people in your life think, I think it was a lot more. I mean, we can't say she did, but we can't say she didn't. Then Chief Frizzo came out and spoke to the media, and she claimed that while she had been speaking with Kelly had claimed there were bodies in Indiana, Michigan, and Tennessee. And they made a deal with her that even if she was to disclose who these people were, or, a way to recover their remains or bring some peace to their families, she couldn't be charged with any of those murders. So a lot of times, like, she's going to spend the rest of her life in prison. She got life, no parole, plus 65 years. The bitch ain't going anywhere. She's going to die there. So I think sometimes in those situations, a lot of times the FBI and police, they'll kind of try to make a deal saying, we won't charge you with any of them for anything, but we want the information. Like, we want to bring closure to the families of these victims. But as of now, she hasn't revealed who any of these people were or where in, like, all of Michigan. Like, she's got Michigan, Indiana, and Tennessee. Like, somewhere in these 3 states, she's claiming she has dead bodies. But no one has ever been able to locate or know who the victims were. And Kelly is currently at the Huron Valley Women's Prison, and she will spend the rest of her life there, and she'll die in prison, which is exactly what she deserves. So yeah, that's the story of Kelly Cochran, known as the Devil Woman. She killed her husband, she killed her lover, possibly 9 more, but we have no idea who those 9 people may be. But I believe it. I'll tell you that. In my personal opinion, I think it could have happened. And like, what's with this pact on your wedding? Like, just imagine, it's your wedding night, and you and your husband or wife sit down and have a conversation. You don't say to each other, you know what? Let's make a pact and let's really commit to each other. Let's guarantee each other we are never going to cheat on each other. We're going to be open. If we're having issues, we're going to talk it through. We're not going to be having affairs. No, they decide on their wedding night, if you cheat on me, you got to murder that person. So, I mean, that's a wedding night like not anything I've ever heard of. But yeah, so anyways, that's the story of Kelly Crazy Cochran, is what I have to say about that. So I hope that you guys enjoyed the video. I just want to send a huge thank you to all of you for liking, subscribing, all the magical YouTube things that you do. And I'm really loving a lot of the comments that you guys are giving. And I'm getting really good suggestions from some of you of cases that I'm going to start looking into. And Sunny Bear, you sent me a suggestion today. This isn't going to be up today. It'll be like a couple days before you'll see this video. You gave me a really good suggestion and I looked it up, Googled it, get on Google. What was the suggestion? And that's a good story. I'm going to do that one. May not be the next one, but it's definitely going to be one I do. So if there's any stories you want to hear, even if there's stories that have been told, quite common, because I always try to cover cases that are less well known, but I do enjoy covering bigger cases as well, because there's a lot more information, and it's, I'm here to make the videos for you guys. So whatever videos you're looking for, let me know, because I love doing this. So I hope that you all are doing amazing. Do something today that makes your soul happy, and I will see you in the next one.